welcome to the fine edition of my so-called 8-bit life. Man, it's been a while since I've said that. I'm your host, Roberto Villegas. Joining me today, hip-hop musician, artist extraordinaire, Lex the Lexicon Artist. How's it going, Lex?
Hey, it's going well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, thank you for being on. It's funny because usually when I have a guest on, I always kind of think about how it is I got this guest kind of in my sphere of circle of people. And for those who have no idea, and chances are you kind of do if you've sort of been around the show, there's an event that happens here in Austin, Texas called South by Southwest. It's interactive.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
It's kind of one of those things that like everybody in the like I forget how international it is every year until I go again, because it's like I think it was like last year that like NHK was here. And actually like Domokun, like their giant, that giant mascot, like for Japan's NHK, that like if you never know, like basically the giant brown furry thing that's like dancing around, basically thank you man in Japanese, which I always love. That's the idea.
That's just super cute.
He was actually doing a whole bunch of like DJ. He was actually DJing at like one of the events.
Oh my god, that's really cool.
It was actually DJ Domokun, which is like. To me, that seems like the most silliest thing. Like the idea of a giant mascot, like just headphones on, turntables, just spinning whatever, and just like ramping up the crowd. It's just like,
that's a really good branding strategy, honestly, because like consumers want to see that corporations like understand them and like are normal people instead of robots.
Well, because what's interesting
they actually did a really good job.
What's interesting about Domokun, and I still find this very fascinating, is how pervasive that mascot is with people that wouldn't even associate with NHK. Like there are people who don't know who Domokun is. As like this is the mascot for the for the national Japanese television thing. They just know it as this big giant brown thing that's on the internet doing silly things.
Okay, I have to admit that I am one of the people who thought that it was a big giant brown thing doing silly things. No, I didn't know it was actually
no, and that's the thing. A whole people don't know that, and I always found that fascinating as like years have gone on, and I've looked into it. It's just like that this mascot. It's like I've known about this mascot longer than I knew it was. Like I knew it was just a Japanese thing. And for years I didn't know. Oh, it's the NHK thing. And it's Domokun. I go, what the hell is Domokun? Because I didn't know anything about like Domo meaning kind of thank you and sort of sorry and sort of thing. This like thank you man. And it's just like I like the idea of a mascot going beyond what its purpose was because the internet happened and just spread that way through animated GIFs and silly little things that I find that so fascinating still that is how that kind of pervased and such. But all that aside, because of all that, just getting back to point, South by is an international event, and I sort of meet a lot of people and sort of introduce a lot of people. And usually I get kind of tasked to pick up people from the airport, a lot of friends, new friends, acquaintances, like, hey, I'm coming to town to do a show, whatever. And a while back, a friend of the show, fan of the show, Vincent Banks, better known as DJ Rockman, was like, hey, I'm going to be busy doing something. Could you pick up this person named Lex? She's one of the nerdcore musicians that's playing, nerdcore days. Like, yeah, sure, totally. It's not a big deal. So I go to the airport, meet you for the first time, grab you from there, and we start chatting about a whole lot of things, and beyond the fact, like, just kind of an intro to Austin, sort of give you that.
Sure.
You're telling me, I think it's like a time that you had, because I had asked you, like, how you got into nerdcore or whatever, just kind of tertiary kind of stuff. And maybe you mentioned that you'd want to be rappers since you were 12, which I still find fascinating. We'll get more into that later. Sure. But it wouldn't be until like, was it that Wednesday you played that week? I think it was Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday
right.
was
It would have been Wednesday since I saw you live. And truth be told, like I had heard your music and I was aware of it, but there's a very big difference, I think, in musicians that recorded versus live. There are some of those musicians that are like really, really great recorded, like a Steely Dan or even like I would almost say like a Yes, Styx maybe. There's a couple of those artists that are just like really great recorded because they get like all the best session musicians, things like that. And they're those artists that like do something amazing live. And those are two hard things to do. And truth be told, it was interesting seeing you perform live because all I had met was the day before was this like person who I'm chatting with about infrastructure or something like that. I'm trying to remember exactly what we talked about, but it's something along those lines. And you go on stage and for lack of better words, you not only flip personality, but it was very, very apparent that you knew what the hell you were doing when you were behind a microphone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So let me preface this by saying that what I have on the internet right now musically is old. It's from 2017. I started doing this in July of 2016, and I started recording stuff around that time. And I put out that EP of March of 2017. At that time, I didn't know how to record very well, and I didn't know how to, manipulate audio and or produce sound in a recorded way that was very good at transmitting what I did live. So I've always been a performer. Like that has always been part of my blood. I've been performing since I was, 4 years old. And so I really value the live performance aspect of whatever I do. But at that time, I was still not very good at recorded things. So what I am thinking you probably got was just that loss of energy that you are hearing from me not knowing how to record very well.
Well, it's not even so much loss of energy. And I think this is what's important. We're getting back to you talking about you getting into performance at 4, and I'm very curious on that already.
Sure.
It wasn't so much loss of energy. It's this idea of, because the thing is, this is what I've learned, and I'm going to preface this by saying, because I have enough friends in nerdcore now, and I have enough friends in music, just as a grander sort of thing. Yeah. And I've never had understood why it is you guys perform. Only because not because I don't understand the idea of interact, because like this is why I preface this, Lex, with this reason. And it wasn't until I went to Tokyo and I went to Square Sounds and I got to go on stage with Rand being like video guy with camera. I'm gonna put this out there. I have no desire to be a nerdcore artist. No desire at all. That is not my lane. That is not where I belong. You're not going to see me spitting bars. You're not going to see me, making sweet rhymes. I can now analyze music and I can critique music and I can take it and, break it down. But you will never, ever see me, throwing down any sort of, I don't know, rhymes. I'm better at listening to music than I am at composing it.
I mean, whatever works for you, right?
No, for sure. But being on stage there with Ran and kind of having, because I'd always been on the other side of the fence, so to speak. Like I'd always been the audience, like knowing the call responses, jamming out, dancing, doing all the stuff and everything you do at a hip hop show. But I'd never been on stage. I'd never been behind the fence as it is. And going there and being upstage with Ran doing video, I realized that there's a certain amount of energy you get from being on stage that you just get from the audience responding.
Yeah.
And so there are artists who I've seen who have been on that side and just fall flat. And
absolutely.
And so
that is.
And so it doesn't, it's not so much a lack of energy in recording because, I mean, you hear something like, the artist Anthem and you get the idea of kind of at least a ballpark idea of what kind of music you're going to encounter. Not so much everything's going to be this, whatever, but you get an idea of like, okay, this is kind of hip hop. It's going to have this. They're going to be a little bit, and in some ways serious, in some ways lighthearted, the kind of balance, if you will. But that in and of itself just gives the idea of here's the music. When I saw you live, it was, no, this person is well aware of how the stage works as a live thing. And you mentioned that you've been performing something since 4. Like, what did you do back at 4 that was like, that got you into doing like any kind of live performance? I'm now really curious.
Sure, I can go all the way back to when I was 4 years old.
Let's pull the Wayback Machine. Let's go in time. It is whatever year you were 4 at, and here you go.
So apparently, I've been playing piano since I was 4. There was a photo of me on Instagram with these cute fucking, Dorothy shoes from Wizard of Oz, and I'm sitting at the piano and I'm playing and I'm 4 years old, right? And
you have these ruby red slippers. You're like, I'm jamming out to heart and soul.
Yeah, you can find it on Instagram. This is like a recital. I was wearing this cute fucking white dress with these Dorothy slippers, and I was playing the piano. And apparently, my piano teacher from that time told my mom when I was 4 years old, she has a very good sense of pitch. I think she has perfect pitch. When I was 4 years old. And I was not aware of this until I hit like 8th grade and I started learning bass. And my bass teacher told me, like, do you have perfect pitch? And I'm like, I don't know if I do. I don't know what that is. And he's like, can you tell notes? Like, can you tell if something is a certain note by like just listening to it? I'm like, doesn't everyone do that?
No. Then, I mean, like, I can barely. Like,
he's like, no.
Like, I'm good enough to where I can mimic pitch, and I can like where my musical skill kind of begins and ends is I'm good at knowing how to be like a backup vocal. Like, I'm good at knowing, all right, here's the lead at this pitch. I can either go lower or higher depending on where it is, and kind of keep in a middle sort of range, like a middle.
Yeah, that's the tonal memory. That's tonal memory.
Like, that's usually where I'm at. Is I have a pretty solid tonal memory, and I can say this. I'm definitely good at breaking down beats now and kind of getting within like a like one, at least in anything in the quarter scale, like anything like a 3/4 time, a 4/4 time, any of those time signatures, I'm pretty damn solid at like understanding stuff, and even more so because of knowing how like electronic music works and how a lot of these actual tools work. I'm good at now understanding, okay, there's the pattern, there's the loop pattern, and sort of breaking down the music that way. Like, I can break down the code of it, so to speak. But
yeah, and rhythm is just a totally different, set of skills from, knowing pitch and tone, and sight reading is a totally different set of skills from either of those things. So you can be great at rhythm, but be really shitty at recognizing pitch and tone, or you can be like, great at both of those things, but you're not able to read music for shit. So, there's a whole bunch of things that are involved in like just kind of knowing music. But, I'm assuming that's like, that's your extent of kind of familiarity.
Well, because
right?
like for me, and this is what's funny, like you talked about like getting piano. Like, I was playing piano as a kid. I used to play saxophone back in middle school because I thought it was cool. And I remember this is how far back it was getting this. And I guess this happens with every brass musician, but specifically saxophone. I remember it was music school in 5th grade, and they're like, "What instrument do you want to play?" I go, saxophone seems kind of cool. And the guy said, "Put your hand out, spread it out like this." For those who can't see, I'm basically spreading out my entire hand like full. And he basically put his hand there. It's like, yeah, it's a good size. You should be fine. I was like, okay, I guess I'm good to play saxophone, alto, and then move on my merry way. But even then, like, yeah, I had been reading music and like I could still read music to this day. I couldn't. Like, I couldn't tell you what a middle C is, like, without, like, maybe I could. I think middle C I could tell you if I heard, yeah.
That's a middle C.
Yeah, like, middle C I can do, and I can definitely tell you, I can read a piano keys and do that, whatever. Apparently I'm coming across quieter than that, so let me pump myself up a bit. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you're doing a live stuff. As it turns out, live audio is very tricky, and, broadcast audio is harder than it's so funny, and I bring this up now. Broadcast audio may be harder than I think any kind of recording audio is, because it's you're like I mean, you've had this experience being on stage before, where like one of the things that I always noticed, and I wonder if this is a pet peeve of yours or not, is when you hear feedback on any of your live performances.
I had a really bad sound issue at one of my shows.
Okay,
at South by
this is go for it.
It was fucking terrible. It was really bad.
Which show was it? Which one was it?
Fucked up my performance. That was I had a Thursday night show at Key Bar, and it was an outside stage, and I had this terrible latency issue that just fucked with my beats, and I could not like hear the bass in my beats. I was like, holy fucking shit.
Oh god, that's. Okay,
yeah.
So to kind of break down for the audience, especially those who are not familiar with audio and wireless and any of these sort of things that both broadcasters and musicians deal with, is the concept of latency. So if you imagine, if you will, a microphone. If it's wired in somewhere, usually there's going to be zero complete utter latency, usually. Only because there's a wire, and usually, it's a 1-to-1 kind of thing. It's kind of like this microphone here. It goes all the way to my recorder. However, my recorder here has a little bit of latency because it's hooking up the USB, doing some stuff, so I got to adjust for that, do things. Where you really get latency issues is when it's like wireless. And I imagine was it a wireless mic that caused the thing, or was it actually a wired mic?
I was using a wireless microphone. Also, you're lagging a lot. I'm wondering if it's
it's probably it probably honestly is. This is what's funny. I'm guessing this is a Skype issue. My bandwidth has a tendency of doing weird, strange things, and I'm betting I'm lagging because of that. Let me make sure the video is actually doing perfectly fine before I continue going down any other things. Yeah, videos.
You're getting better. You're getting better.
Yeah. Welcome to the world.
Okay, but let me explain what I was running into. I was using a wireless microphone, but it was my Beats that had latency issues, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it had something to do with the fact that I was running it out mono, and there was just some weird shit going on, and it didn't. It made me a little bit nervous because there were a lot of people watching that, I guess I really wanted to impress. But I just, still went for it. And when I, couldn't hear myself, I just, fucking ran into the audience and, just fucking yelled at people to their faces. And that worked out. And I just didn't even give a shit. And I just finished the performance and I walked off and I was like, holy shit, that was a rush.
And I'm not laughing.
And then there were people who came up to me who said that it was I handled it really well. I'm not a diva. I'm not a queen about, I'm not a prima donna about, sound issues and things like that. If shit goes wrong, I just keep performing. And then afterwards I get off stage and people come up to me and say, wow, you handled that really well.
Well, because I think a lot of times the audience doesn't know when audio issues happen, or they're only aware of it if they're really, really bad. Like something kicks off, something cuts off, like your background, audio goes bye-bye or whatever. But usually audience members don't notice bad things. And unless they're musicians themselves and they're listening going hey, that sounds a little bit off, or her vocals sound this. I remember, I think it was MagFest a couple of years back, friend of the show and band friend of the show, Bitforce, they had performed live at MagFest, and I guess somebody had forgot, they use a click track for their backing vocals. So that's sort of this thing that keeps a beat, and that way, if you're a drummer or singer or guitarist, you can kind of know, cool, this is the beat I need to keep on. Mm-hmm. Their click track was broadcasted through the stream. It wasn't put in the audience in any way, shape, or form, but the stream audio, the audio that anyone online was watching would see, that's what the audience heard. And so you actually heard their click track while they're playing their music. And I think the joke was that that was Bitforce featuring DJ Click Track, because it was just such a weird thing to happen. But all those sort of things are, I think for a live performance, and I think that speaks to you as a performer, and obviously, performed for a while. Mm-hmm. A lot of it is, I imagine, adjusting on the fly and sort of understanding how it is to go and say, all right, problem happened. How do I course correct quickly? How do I dodge this issue? Because there are some artists who just stop and move on. But it's nope, I got to move on. I got to route around it. I got to just it's sort of the network protocol, sort of try to figure out, okay, well, there's a wall here. I can either jump over it, I could power through it, or, kind of find around the other side. I know, I'd almost want to say, even Samus, I've seen, other friend of the show, have issues before, and she'll have the tendency to just go a cappella if an audio kills, and she'll just start singing. If the microphone goes, she'll just start doing whatever, and the audience is screaming, kind of like what you did. But let's kind of go back. Let's rewind back, because obviously we got way off track, which is
there is something that I really don't appreciate, which is people blaming their audio equipment, or blaming the sound guy, or blaming whatever, when it's them fucking up. And that is a sign of a bad rapper, because bad craftsmen blame their tools. And when it's you fucking up, and you're telling people to stop and you start again over and over, and blame everyone except yourself, that's stupid.
This is why we have what's called sound check, and that's why sound check exists as a thing, is that you're supposed to, because every musician and every artist setup is different. Being a guy that's been at various types of shows, from rock to electronica to rap to hip hop to classical, every one of them have different challenges and audio requirements. Even like miking up a violin is way different than miking up a drum. And so figuring those things out and now in some capacity being behind that mixer board and kind of getting that it in itself is also stressful, because if something's not working correctly and you're the guy behind the board and you're caring about what comes out of the audio as much as the person who's playing the music, it can kind of stress you out too. So I understand why you feel that way in terms of like not yelling at the sound guy, because it's like if he's doing his job, he's working just as hard as you are up there, just in a different fashion, I imagine.
I think it's really important for performers to not be divas. And I think it's really important for them to respect whoever that they're working with and to understand that they're working just as hard as they are and they deserve an equal amount of respect. Because if you are a diva or if you treat other people like shit, then you're not a good person. And you're fucking up. And you're not a good performer if you can't improvise on the fly when shit goes wrong. And if you can't control yourself when shit goes wrong, you're a bad performer.
And what's funny is like that's the traditional job of an MC. Not necessarily musician hip hop as we know it now, but MC as in master of ceremonies. He's the guy that's supposed to, or girl, person, that's supposed to go, vamp when things are being set up, keep everything kind of flowing a certain way, introduce the next act, and do those sort of things. That's sort of where I think you start to see your really stellar musicians are the ones that are able to, course correct on the fly, or able to do this. Like I've seen music people who have, I've been to performances where a keyboard will just go out and the rest of the band will kind of pick up the slack and just start jamming out and doing something so that the audience doesn't notice, and they're just filling cables, and the keyboard comes back. It's like, yeah, music's back. And then they can, continue the song. And that's not uncommon to see, just because, I mean, it's a live situation. Anything and everything can go wrong. It's just the nature of the game. But kind of we should kind of go back talking about the past. So it was in middle school, perfect tone, everything else, bass.
Let me go back. Okay, so piano was my first instrument, but definitely not my main. When I was in second grade, you mentioned that you had the opportunity to choose your instrument. Now, I kind of did, but basically my parents just kind of presented two options at me. My mom was like, Alex, you need to learn an instrument now. Do you want violin or flute? And I'm like, violin. So violin is my main instrument. I started playing when I was 8 years old, and then I played it all the way to 16, 17 years old. And my parents paid for a lot of lessons, and I didn't practice as much as I should have. I have a love-hate relationship with violin in itself, but I was like the typical Asian child, being very good at violin, and I didn't realize how good I was. Like, I really did not realize, and I really did not like it for a really long time, but that was something that really, really set down my musical foundations, just being able to play violin.
Well, because violin's a very, as string instruments go, it's like I had two friends back in elementary school that were really, really good at violin, and they were twins. And violin as a string instrument's already like one of those very, very classical instruments. Just everyone kind of knows that. You can kind of use it everywhere. In fact, I think it is one of the more versatile instruments. I've never heard a song where I feel a violin's out of place. There's like certain songs where you hear a saxophone, that feels like it's out of place. That doesn't belong there. You hear a tuba, and it's like a tuba doesn't belong in this song. But a violin is like you could put it in classical, you can put it in country, you can put it in even some type of electronica type stuff. You can put it everywhere. It sounds like it can have this sort of ethereal sound. I think that only it can do as a string instrument. I think it's one of the few string instruments that can do that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think violin is very versatile. It's definitely, for me, it has, classical connotations to it, but I've seen it being used in hip hop. Lindsey Sterling obviously uses it for dubstep. You can do all sorts of things with it. It is, very flexible as far as, what you can do with it, as opposed to, I guess, a viola or a cello. Those are more limited in their uses. But I definitely got a lot out of playing violin, and not even because I like doing it, just because of, the intense ear training that I had to do when I was learning violin, and just, the intense specificity in learning music theory and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
No, and it makes sense because, like, again, violins also very. I mean, again, this is not to say that any other instrument is not technical. Like, in other words, piano's still technical. I think every instrument's technical. Hell, I listen to music made on Game Boys, and I still think that's kind of technical too, in a fully different way. But
rapping's really technical.
Everything is technical. Nothing is technical. But that being said, I still feel like because the violin is like, as instruments go, like if you think of a guitar, or like electric guitar, or even an acoustic one, specifically electric, like you can get away with just knowing power chords, like just kind of knowing these sort of like really simple sort of chords and kind of just jam really fast. Yeah, at least in the electrical side,
but it doesn't mean that you're good at it.
I didn't say you're good at it. I didn't say you were good at it. I said you can get away with it, and being you
can pick up chicks with it.
being a punk rocker by love and almost the beginnings of my rock music listening, I fully have respect for the power chord and strumming it as fast as you fucking can. But that's neither here nor there. But when you start talking about technical stuff and actually like dexterity, like a violin requires that, especially when you start doing it at like a faster pitch. Like you're doing classical, you can kind of get away being a little bit slower and whatnot. But if you do something like a country or whatever, you're doing like a lot of different kind of, fingered dexterity kind of things, which I've always found impressive when it comes to doing violin. That makes sense.
There are no frets on violin. Initially I put on tape on the violin just to like know where the notes are. But eventually you pretty much have to know where the notes are by heart. And not even shitting you, it was not easy to learn. There were so many technical things that I had to learn. But violin is like, it's not easy to learn. As far as like, I picked up bass in 8th grade, and that is easy to learn, but very hard to learn to play well. I really wanted to play something along the lines of, a rock instrument, and I was like, fuck guitar, let's do bass. And so I picked up the bass, and I played it for like 6 months, but then I never really got very far with it. I can do basic things, but I'm not very good at it. I'm like, I can scrape by. But I was part of, a cover band in high school and things like that. But around like my middle school years, even before that, when I was like 9, 10, 11 years old, I started listening to hip hop, and I discovered, I bought Linkin Park's Meteora. It was like one of my first ever albums, and I just like completely fell in love with it. It was so loud, it was so like abrasive, and it was so emotional, and I like loved all of it. And then I discovered Eminem's The Eminem Show, which was another one of my first physical albums, and I just ate that fucking shit up. It's like, it was nasty, there was curse words, and I just felt super rebellious listening to the whole thing. I mean, there's a fucking song called Superman in there. It's just that's just so fucking nasty.
I love
like
that this
10 years old.
I love that this is your intro to hip hop. Was like, it's funny just kind of being able to talk to artists throughout the years and sort of their generational stuff and hearing everyone's sort of inspirations. And I love that yours is like Meteora and Linkin Park. Like, cause I couldn't even tell you what year it was, because I can't remember what year the album came out, but
2003.
Well, Meteora is that one, but the thing is like by that point in time, like because I think everybody who got into Linkin Park, at least of my era, like Hybrid Theory is sort of the first thing that really sort of exploded on the mainstream. Was like Crawling in the Skin.
I mean, Hybrid Theory is great too. It was just not the first thing that I listened to.
No, and that's why I find it fascinating. Just like the idea that, and again, this is music. Music is eternal. You can get into anything at any point in time, whether it's late, new, or whatever. It doesn't matter. But I find it fascinating just hearing that like your introduction to hip hop was like the beginnings or sort of the middle port of hip hop. Because if you think of like the spectrum of that genre, you have sort of the turntable kind of era and sort of the beginning stuff. You then have sort of like the more kind of synth beat driven stuff, and then you kind of gangster rap somewhere in there in the middle there. And like you came in at the point where you started seeing this like really interesting merge of rock and rap, I think, especially with like Linkin Park, like Meteora was totally that. Was just like this.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's my shit. That's that shit that I like. Oh yeah.
I haven't I had not thought. What's funny, I had not thought about Meteora until because like after a certain point, like not not to say anything bad about Linkin Park, you know. I mean, there's always the joke of like Linkin Park being this band that like I remember there was a joke back in for my group of friends where back during the heydays of anime music videos where like everybody would be like using Crawling in My Skin or you know, one step like I'm about, what is it, like, because I'm one step close to the edge, I'm about to break, like it'd always be like those 5 songs, and it's like we're gonna put that to Dragon Ball Z when Cell and when Cell fights Goku, and it's gonna be that, it's just gonna be that whole scene, not cutting, no editing, just gonna be that whole scene with Crawling in My Skin playing in the background, because that's what I imagined it to be. Like that was a music video. I'm sorry, that's me venting on shitty AMVs back in my early days.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah.
But like I hadn't thought about that until was it Chester that passed away recently? The
Chester,
main,
yeah.
I hadn't thought about like
Chester.
I mean, it's always tragic. D&D Slugger says, "Oh yeah, and the drift videos too." Yes, God, we could almost have a full segment on like just shitty anime music videos and like the songs that everybody used, because there's only like 5, and everyone knows the 5, and everyone knows exactly which ones. Like, oh, they're using this one today. Like it was always the same crap ones, and it still continues on to this day. But going back sort of to everything, because you mentioned getting into hip hop and kind of listening to the Marshall Mathers and Eminem and all that kind of stuff. If you're the same person, what then got you to start wanting to become more on the performance side of things? Like what, obviously you performed before, but listening to music and listening to rap and saying, oh, this is cool, this is interesting, I like this, and then flipping to making actual compositions is an entirely different matter.
Oh, yeah, totally. So I was a total loser kid. I had no friends. I spent all of my days on the internet talking to like online friends.
That is an opening. That is an amazing opening, and I say that because it's like that's what got me into doing internet broadcasting. Was I had friends, but I was on the computer, and I'm like, well, there's this internet thing. But anyways, continue. Sorry, I'm just laughing just at the idea of like I was a total loser friend, and I decided to make rap instead. Like, okay.
No, I had no friends, and I got into this thing. I got into this online community. This was before nerdcore hip hop, so this is like my first internet family. It was called Human Beatbox, and I became enamored with like beatboxing, learning how to beatbox, making like random sounds with my mouth and stuff like that. And like I became really interested in competitive beatboxing, and so that was how I started getting into performing and being on stage. I would basically just go up on stage and do like a minute or a minute and a half kind of routines, like right. I would do that, and then I would like basically diss people using like beatboxing beats, and like, you know, we would like riff back and forth. It's like beatbox battling was an international thing, mostly in Europe, you know, mostly in the UK and France and Germany, and you know, that was back in, you know, like 2006 2007. I got really into that, and became, you know, very enamored with the performance side of it. But I wasn't able to attend any of the events because they were all in Europe, and I was 16 years old. Well, I was 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, and then I could not go into any of the clubs, and I like had no money to fly out to Europe. And so I was like, you know, like I never got to participate in like the international challenges, but I did a whole bunch of local, you know, battles in Taiwan, and that was really fun. And eventually I, you know, during all this time, and this was also before, I had wanted to write rap music and write rap lyrics. I think, you know, all the rap just kind of got ingrained in my head. And I started writing parody songs. I would, like, in the Weird Al style, I would take, you know, existing songs, and I would, you know, make lyrical parodies of them. And I was actually pretty good at it. And I realized that, you know, the way out of me being a loser kid was to actually make rap music. And it didn't work at first. At first, you know, I wanted to join this hip hop club that I had at school, and then I walked in the door, and there was like only the supervisor teacher there, and I was the only kid, and I was like, oh shit.
No, that's the worst. That is the worst to happen. Yeah, is that you walk in and you realize you're the only person in your like area of the world that's into this one thing. God, that's the beauty, I think, of the internet, though, and I think like you. Like, it's funny you mentioning like getting into it through beatboxing, and I was thinking like, when was the last time I like beatboxing was big, it beyond being Europe? And I think it had to be like the early days of hip hop. Like that was sort of a thing. Like back we're talking like God, I had to think when the last time I heard like real like solid beatboxing in terms of stuff, but that's the worst. Is like, so you literally walk into this room and it's like, hi, I'm Lex. How's it going? Where's everybody else? And the advisor's like, you are everybody else. Welcome to the club.
Yes, that is exactly what happened. And I was super embarrassed. And I was like, oh, shit, I guess I'm never going to be a rapper. And then
that was the end of the dream.
My 8th grade teacher. Yeah, no, not yet. My 8th grade teacher assigned my entire class a rap project. And he said, find a random beat on the internet and write a rap song. And this is your final project of the year. And I was like, my chance to shine. And then I wrote a song and I submitted it. And then when I submitted it, here's the great part.
Yep.
My teacher turns to me, looks at me straight in the eye, and he's like, Alex, you're really good at this. You should do this more. And that has never left my mind.
That is weirdly awesome.
Then, I knew that I could do it.
That is wow, because there's always that like joke, and obviously you're like you started in 2016, so there's plenty more years in your career to kind of go on, but there's always that joke. When you look back at like, especially when you look back in your life and you look back at like those key moments in your mind that like flipped you to go one way versus the other. Cause like, honestly, I always like looking at life in like, here are those like if you remember like in video games, they have it specifically in like a lot of Telltale games where it's like, X person remember your decision. And it's like that like junction point where you can split the story off either going A track or B track or C track kind of thing. I always imagine like those moments. I can imagine, at least looking back now, that was the moment at least I've kept you going on and on in terms of like being a musician. And like, had you not had that moment, had that project never happened, and it's not to get like
not been doing this.
Right. And that's I'm not to get like dark philosophical, but it's like it's fascinating going from like the one end where you go this like, well, I'm into hip hop. Let's see what everyone's doing. Oh, no one's into this except for me. Well, that's it. I'm done. And then your teacher saying, well, we're all gonna do rap stuff. Like, I've never had a teacher I think that's ever like done that. I'm trying to think if I've ever had that moment where like a teacher's like, all right, we're gonna do something computer related. Man, that's insane. So you mentioned...
Yeah. I'm actually... Oh, go ahead.
No, go on. Continue.
Oh, I was just said, I'm actually writing a song about that right now. I shouted out my teacher in like this new song that I'm writing. It's a fucking amazing song. I'm super excited. It's a collab with Schaefer the Dark Lord, and it's so fucking good. It's like, it's all about like why we do what we do. And it is just like, we talk about our, influences and, the reasons behind what we do and what we write. And like, I'm like spoiling a little bit here. I'm not going to go into like too much of it, but basically it's kind of the same story, despite the fact that we come from like, different backgrounds and different generations and grew up with different, kinds of music at different times. It's still the same story of a, just like, well, his words were like wallflower loser kid or something like that. Just like, fueled by these hip hop dreams.
Well, because I think at the core, especially when it comes to musicians and any creative, mind you, whether it be in film, video, internet, writing, whatever. I think at a very core level, being creative is you're desperately trying to communicate with the world in some capacity. Either because you found the medium in which you're best at communicating, that you're best at expressing your ideas, you're best at expressing your feelings. In musicians' case, it's music, whether it be instrumental, whether it be hip hop in your case, or video and that kind of stuff. And I think that is the real common theme when it comes to musicians is this real desperate need to express themselves and sort of convey that musically.
And I found that hip hop was the best medium for me, or like being a rapper was the best medium for me to communicate the way I carry myself, the way I see the world. It was, the best fit. I've tried a whole bunch of other things. I tried, writing stories. I've tried doing theater. I tried to be an actor for a little bit. I did a little bit of acting and directing and writing, in college. And that was where I got a lot of like my stage performance chops, was just like knowing how to navigate the stage just from being an actor. I was not a very good actor, but I'm a very good rapper / performer. And so, it's just like sometimes one avenue of expression does not work. and then something else works way better than that. And I think I've found mine, and that's kind of like what led me to this. Like in June of 2016, I basically June of 2016, yeah, I basically was like, you know what, I'm gonna start writing rap music. And then I got so into it that by February the next year, I decided to kind of, take a break from my full-time job and, put a lot more effort and time into this. And that was when I started getting super, very serious about it. And, the conclusion of all of this, is I've, done so many things throughout my life, as far as performance and music goes. And this has been the final conclusion that makes the most sense. And I'm only getting better every day as far as performing and as far as writing goes. And I'm super happy with the kind of artist identity that I've established here so far. And I can only see better things happening from here on out.
No, it's totally. And it's funny because you mentioned, and you've only kind of briefly alluded to this, and I'm actually really curious because you've mentioned, and we talked about this in passing, because when I first picked you up, sure, I was literally coming out of a Taiwanese showcase, literally Taiwanese beats, and it was like a lot of electronica, weird kind of stuff as I'm into. And you mentioned, I'm originally from Taiwan, which I found still fascinating. This is something I'm actually curious, because Taiwan's that part of the world that I'm only tangentially aware of. Like I know, on at least on the political side, I'm far more aware of what's going on there, and sort of that nature. We'll just leave it, like we'll just take that and put it aside, just to not touch that minefield.
That'll take like fucking 15 minutes.
We that's a minefield, and while I'm happy to talk politically, I'm happy to talk about my views on that minefield. Perhaps not the time right now.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's too much. But
I know Taiwanese politics. That's my home, so I could talk about it if you want, but I'm not going to.
No. But that's not the point, because I think like you bring up the idea of artists, sort of, especially with you and Schaefer, having obviously different backgrounds, different musical backgrounds, different sort of inspirations. And I think as part of, especially in nerdcore and especially in hip hop in general, part of an artist's sort of base of how they compose their lyrics, as to what they talk about, of how they convey themselves, is utilizing life experiences. And I mean, sort of think every creative does that, but I think it's even more so in hip hop, because I think the more honest you are with who you are and what it is you represent, the better your music comes off, and the more the easier it is actually to write and perform. I'm not saying it becomes this amazingly easy thing, but it becomes a lot easier the more honest you are and the more open you are in terms of that. So I guess I should ask,
the more people like you too.
Yep. Yeah. No. Because I have been sort of lucky in that I have learned over the years, because I always kind of fascinated by sort of my inspirations and sort of how I am, because like a good portion of me is Mexican and has a lot of background in going to Puebla, going to Mexico, visiting relatives, and having this sort of identity there. But a good chunk of it's like also being geek, playing video games, watching anime, and getting into all these sort of weird things. And there's always that like dichotomy of having those two sort of things, that a good chunk of my inspiration's from being who I am, and a good chunk of my inspiration comes from this weird country of Japan, because I watch animations from that or play video games from that area. And I guess I'm trying to, I guess what I'm trying to allude to and ask, only because you keep bringing up sort of the take on that. What is, I guess, what is the hip hop scene like in Taiwan? Let's just go with that. Let's start with that as an opener and see where that goes into there, or at least in your sort of take on things. How is it that you got into that over there, or found a place over there? Or was it until you came back home stateside? I guess I try to figure out like the history of things. That makes any sense.
I'm gonna be totally honest with you. The Taiwanese music scene is very top heavy, which means that there's barely any independent stuff going on, or not as much as I know of. So I was very surprised when you talked to me about that showcase that you went to, because I was like, whoa, there's actually people doing weird, interesting, underground independent stuff, which I did not expect, because the Taiwanese music scene is so top heavy and so, heavily controlled by labels. And it's so, it's so insular in a way that a lot of my family members and friends who work in the music industry in Taiwan, have, run into problems because of this. And it's, you can't get anywhere a lot of the time without a big label. And I have to say that personally, I'm not very familiar with the hip hop scene that exists in Taiwan as far as like the underground goes and as far as
but even
the
knowing
mainstream goes, even. And I just there is stuff going on, and I will say that Chinese hip hop is blowing up right now, like hip hop in China. Like a lot of it is copying kind of like the trap stuff that's popular these days. Like, Higher Brothers is basically the Chinese Migos, and they do some really lit stuff, but it's, it's not very conscious per se. It's like very much something that you get lit to. It's my guilty pleasure. But there is like a lot of Chinese and Taiwanese rap going on. I'm just like, I have to say that when I was growing up, it was not really something that was really on my radar as much as the American stuff. I was listening to people like 50 Cent and Dr. Dre and Eminem. And so I was, the hip hop that I was influenced by strongly was from America. And the way I had access to it was through the internet. And that is what I have to say about that. I wish I knew more.
No, but even you
go ahead.
Like even you alluding to, and I think this is also an important thing, and I think this is why now you're starting to see a lot more weird stuff out of countries, because you're absolutely right, especially about Taiwan being that way and China being that way, and what I'm more familiar with is sort of the Japanese side of music, and I almost want to say, like, right now we're in this weird musical portion of time where the cost of making music has drastically gone down. Like, we're at a point now where, if we were to take what it was like just looking at Lex's setup, for those who can't see it visually, she has her right now. I'm guessing that's an AT2020 in front of her, if I'm right. My microphone looks.
It's actually an AT2035,
okay.
But good guess.
Well, it's Audio Technica. It's like I know my microphones. It's an Audio Technica microphone, which is a very, very popular one. It's a condenser mic, whatever. But the price for those things are now, you can get a decent microphone sub $100. You can get I
think those are 150.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
Like, you can get that. You can buy software. You don't even have to pay for software to do. You could literally record off of Audacity, an open source piece of software on your computer, and start recording something. You can compose music on GarageBand, which comes free with Macs and stuff like that. Like, we're at this point now where the cost of making music has just drastically dropped, and also the cost of distributing music has drastically dropped. Which is great and awesome. That's why I think you're starting to see a lot more of this sort of weird experimental stuff, because even you bringing up the way that it being controlled, and the same thing when it comes to other countries, even here in the States, it was that way too, especially during the early 90s and even like the early 2000s. It wasn't until like, I want to say maybe like 2012 really when we had internet music, we had things going, but we didn't have what we have now. Like, what we have now is,
I think what changed it was Napster and LimeWire.
No, that's what kicked off. Yeah, that's what kicked off the idea of digital distribution and the idea of we can make this digitally and release it. But I mean, the idea there's again.
The making music. Yeah.
There's the idea of how it is like I'm always amazed that what I'm doing right now, like, to kind of put in perspective, I'm here in Austin, Texas. You're in California, and yet we're having this conversation over video and streaming to the internet to everybody in the world. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's fucking cool. And that'll never, ever stop being cool to me. That to me is I think the magic of the internet. I think the message of having this like giant pipeway to the rest of the world. And I think because of that, like, that's sort of why even hearing you mention like that in the big scene for sure. And I think that's why you're now starting to see a lot of these Stranger Things out of other countries. Like, I was a couple days ago, I kind of got into a weird synthwave outrun sort of mood, and I just started tripping down and learning new artists in that genre. And one of them, like, all of them are in like the UK or Europe, but I think I found one in like Sweden, and I was like, okay, this is random. I didn't expect. There's one I found in Detroit, which I was like, holy shit, there's synthwave in Detroit. Wow. And so I think hearing you even allude to the fact that there was this sort of scene, in at least to your tangential awareness of the sort of control in Taiwan, really kind of speaks to why it is you started seeking the internet for this stuff, because you were interested, you know.
I am an internet fan. I became obsessed with a lot of rappers on the internet. I am 100% for the kind of, mass distribution and accessibility of music creation and consumption. And I absolutely love the fact that we can just make music without needing some sort of like label controlling. I'm not saying that I don't want a label. If I get big enough, I want a label because that'll help me do things that I can't do on my own. At the same time, I could have not done this if we didn't have the technologies we have today. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm so excited that I am able to do what I love and share it with the world with barely any money.
And I think that's what I this is the part of what I enjoy about music now, and why it is I am, like, a lot of people always talk about the idea that music is dead, or the idea of how
serious?
People always like, being around as many scenes as I have over the years, Lex, and from punk to rock to rap to chiptunes to electronica, we could go. My musical kind of journey began back in the Nintendo, listening to freaking video game soundtracks and stuff like that. Everybody has said, at least at one point or another, something X is dead, or blank has sold out, or Y is, that it'll continue to be iterated, throughout the eons, because things change and life expands.
Nerdcore is dead.
Yep. No, you'd be surprised. You would honestly be surprised how many people say that, how many people say chiptunes is dead. Like, it's not even, and it's hard because a lot of it requires you, like, a lot of people who are that way, who say X is dead, it's that something new has happened and they haven't quite figured out how to, K Helmatic says in the chat room, nerdcore is bread. Which I like that idea. I like nerdcore is nothing more than a fine loaf of rye. I don't know why I said it rye. Rye just was the first, but wheat bread, rye.
Uh-huh.
I'm more impartial to sourdough. Nerdcore.
I like what is that kind of bread? Dutch Crunch is my fucking favorite.
Dutch Crunch bread. Nerdcore. God, that sounds actually like a nerdcore, like a fucking shove, like. People in the chat room, if there is such a music genre called Dutch Crunch, let me know. And if not, someone should start getting on that now. And if not, someone gets here's your free band name, Dutch Crunch.
Probably be Gabber. It would be like.
But let's kind of go on to the future. We've done relegating the past and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Let's go that, because you mentioned sort of songs you're working on, and I know you have a new album coming out sometime in June, right? I think you said June.
I do.
So
June 6th.
What's the overall arching, I guess, theme? Like, how, like, because obviously you mentioned before, a lot of the stuff you've had prior recording is from sort of your early days before you started kind of getting used to being on stage and doing kind of like live music and stuff like that. How has that sort of transition helped in terms of like making the new stuff? I say new stuff just as like the stuff we're going to be hearing pretty soon. Because I know I've heard a lot of. I've heard at least one song I think is going to come off that. I think Peep Game, that's one of the songs I think on the new album.
Peep Game and Artist Anthem are the first and second tracks to that album. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you've heard Peep Game. So number one thing is that I've got all the vocals recorded, obviously, and some of those I've done. Actually, all of the vocals I've recorded I've done since October of 2016. 2017. And at that point, I became very much better at recording in the studio. And so the first thing that anyone should know about this album is that the vocals and the way I deliver things sounds a billion fucking times better than anything you've heard so far, except for maybe Artist Anthem, because that was well done.
Lex's new album now featuring better vocals. Like, I'm sorry, my brain just like, I love like that. That's the lead. That's the lead tag. That's like everything aside. It's like, now we've got better vocals. Like, okay, that's interesting tag. No, because
it's true.
No, for sure. I think that is the hope and dream of every artist, is that they, that's obviously what you would want as an artist, is to have in some capacity felt like you've improved or have done something that people in the chat room saying LEX was dope and talking about other things. So people seem
thank you.
Which I mean, it was, but it's interesting hearing you say that about that, but because it's funny kind of thinking that, and I'm bringing this up because just thinking about Artist Anthem as a song, and maybe this will help me, jettison someplace else. Because if I think of like LEX as a song, and it's one of those songs, I guess, that and maybe you're more, because you're a performer, you're more aware of this having to be a thing, and maybe just me as a listener, I'm aware of this now, is that every single hip hop artist seems to have like their intro song, but like not so much their like intro, like their introduction song, like hi, like much like Eminem, like hi, my name is Slim Shady, and all those sort of things, like all have that, like you're LEX, my name is LEX, and I forget the rest of the lyrics, which is a bummer.
Oh, my name is Lex, I am a rapper, I wrote this rhyme on the crapper.
Right, and then you continue on into the rest of the groove and go off into the sunset. But comparing that to like Artist Anthem,
that is my intro song. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
But comparing that to Artist Anthem, like Artist Anthem is one of those songs, like, to me, that I relate to more than I thought I would relate to, because I'm not necessarily like, I'm not a musician, and I know that, but I have that same kind of like a lot of those same doubts in my life, in the idea of like, am I?
You create things.
That's true. No, I am, and I think that's the point. Like being a creative, you get that idea of, the imposter syndrome and whether or not you belong in something or whether or not you're supposed to be here, or that kind of thing. It's every creative, I think, goes through that exact same challenge. Sure. And hearing that song and then hearing Peep Game when I heard it live, like, okay, cool. What else can we, I guess, what else can we hope to get from it? I realize I'm trying to like tease out what the album's about before the album comes out. And I'm just trying to get like idea of like how compared to your early stuff, what it is that's going to be not different per se, but I guess a change, but in a good way. I guess improve would be the right word. What's improved versus your early stuff beyond like vocals, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, sure. No, I was going to get into that.
Okay, perfect. Then.
But I started talking about the vocals. I just wanted to get out of the way that this fucking thing is going to be way better than anything you've heard so far. I'm super excited about it. The second thing is the title of the album is called Raging Ego. My plan is to basically title EPs with a pun. So like then my next EP might be called Lex Collab. Because the last one was called Lex is More. Right. But the full length albums are gonna, be about me basically. And, something that I've come to acknowledge about myself is I have this kind of like bravado ego. And I have this, confidence about myself that I've built over multiple years of like being bullied and ostracized. And so it's a raging ego that has its dark underbelly in a sense. And that's what this album is about. It's not a concept album specifically per se, but every single song has something to do with that. So first song, Peep Game, that's like the obvious like, intro, right? And it's a bravado song. It's like I'm stunting and I'm like, being really braggadocious. And then there's Artist Anthem, which is, also about my ego, but in a totally different light. And so there, pretty much just multiple songs like that. I kind of encompass a whole bunch of different topics, including what I used to do for work, a song called Sales Freak. I wrote a song about how, we write very autobiographical songs that kind of expose the deepest parts of ourselves to people who, to audiences who don't even know who we are, and, market that and kind of, have these secret journals that we basically have to distribute to the world because we want to be famous. And that entire song is all about, how being vulnerable in music affects other people. And so there's a song about that, Curse of Creativity. And then I have other songs that a lot of them which I performed at South by Southwest. But topics go from like being very vulnerable about things like love and relationships to my college major, to shit that I've done in the past that was really bad, to obviously my work, self-doubts, things like that. So everything sort of revolves around how I see myself, and my life experiences too, and that kind of goes back to Less is More, where I talk about my dating experience in Undateable. I talk, I have the Glasses song. There are a couple of remixes on this new album too, so expect a remix of expect a remix of Glasses, expect a remix of Artist Anthem. I'm spoiling a lot, but at the same time, it's like I think I just go in deeper and I cut more veins than Less is More. So I get more serious. There are a couple serious, vulnerable, very like vein cutting songs, and then there are some that are really funny, but funny in like kind of like sharp and like biting kind of way. And so that's what I think what you can expect. 11 tracks, kind of goes in between funny, sharp cutting / serious and introspective. As you would expect from like nerdcore artists.
Well, because I think that's ultimately your style.
Go ahead.
Like I think that like I was because after South by I sort of wrote a whole kind of just sort of info dump and sort of feeling dump of everything that kind of went down as long as it was. And when it came to trying to describe your music, I couldn't quite write this out because I couldn't quite figure out how to write it without sounding condescending or without sounding like a complete asshole. But I think that's like the line that you ride. When I say like an asshole, meaning like how do I say that an artist is both serious but joking, and how do I say that without sounding like because I think like that's the appeal I think to you as a musician, is that because there's nerdcore and hip hop.
Absolutely.
There's nerdcore that digs heavy into being silly. Like as much as I love Creative Mind Frame, he's a great friend, awesome person, a human being. He does a lot more kind of silly stuff. He does, Do It for the Pie or Morphin Time or anything like that. And that's not bad. That's great music and whatever. Ran at times does some more serious stuff and leans into that a bit. Not saying that everyone sort of flows different. Like Chris, IQ, the friend of the show, does a lot more serious. But I think the appeal to you as a musician, and I think that's what I caught on when I saw you and sort of heard your music that day, was that like that you ride this line very much finely, because it's a very fine line between being serious and being joking, and how you do that, like that whole for lack of better words, people are saying K. Hillmatic says self-deprecating is the go-to phrase. And yes, of course, it's self-deprecating humor. And as a person that makes a lot of self-deprecating humor of himself, I fully get that kind of concept as like, okay, if you insult yourself, everyone seems to lighten up, and you can kind of, use that as sort of a way to kind of go into something else or talk about something more in that. But writing that line is as delicate as you do, like it's something that was like impressed me a lot, because it's hard. I think it's hard to ride that.
Thank you.
Well, because I think it's hard to ride that line and not come off as hating yourself, like really, like as not coming off as for lack of better words, depressing. Which I don't know. I mean, I realize I'm using a lot of like weird terms because it's just like it's difficult to talk about those things and to do it without like saying like, oh, this, because it's because I was talking to a friend on the way back from one of the shows. And they were like, is she serious about all that stuff in Artist Anthem and all that stuff? I go, well, in ways she is, and in ways she isn't. In that we all go through it as creatives, where we have this sort of stuff, like basically explaining imposter syndrome as quick as I could, and doing all that kind of things. But it's one of the things that appeals to that I think appealed to me musically for you, was how well you rode that line in terms of being silly and being serious. And I think that's
thank you. I appreciate it.
A skill. We're almost out of time. We're actually at the hour mark. Go for it.
Oh, we are?
Yeah, no, it's okay. Say what you're gonna say. It's okay. I just want to make sure I say this because we've almost at the hour mark, and I love that's how we are at the show. Is that if I do it right, no one realizes it.
Okay. Here's what I have to say about that. First of all, you don't have to worry about offending me by saying that I'm funny. I realize that some people really want to be like, oh, Cena's serious rappers or whatever. I've always thought that, like, if I could be funny to people, because, like, I tried stand-up comedy and I'm shit. I can't get the timing right, but I'm a fucking good rapper. And so if I can be funny in the raps, like, I would love to do that. Like, I think live experience is such an important thing. And if I can make people kind of be like, is this okay? Oh, wait a second. Yeah, it is okay. Which is what happens with Artist Anthem all the time. And then they start singing, oh, I need professional help. I am an artist and I hate myself. It's like, when you can change their perceptions like that, that feels like really powerful. And I don't care if people want to see me as gimmicky, because even if I'm gimmicky, I'm making an impression, and I can make a fucking impression in like 3 songs. And I'll talk about funny things that also are kind of serious, like Undateable. I'll talk about like my dating experiences and make it kind of like, you know, comedic in a sense, you know, just talking about the stuff that I've experienced that's just so ridiculous. And it's always a fine line of kind of combining, personal experiences and doing some really sharp and like kind of witty commentary on it. And that's something that I've tried to do a lot. Like every single time I write a song, I try to think of like, you know, what overarching message it is delivering to whoever's listening to it. At the same time, is it going to be entertaining? Like my number one priority is always to entertain. And I don't care if people think I'm gimmicky or funny. Like if it works, if I'm getting people to engage, that's the number one priority. And I'm doing a couple more of those in the new album. Yeah, and I know what you're saying about, you know, some people doing more silly stuff, some people like leaning into the more serious stuff, and then some people getting really, really serious. And I'm just like, I think I'm a happy middle. I do funny songs and I do, you know, like more like darker, serious songs. I really just write about whatever the fuck I want. So whatever I'm feeling, I do.
No, and that shows, or at least that showed for me watching the performance live when I did, and sort of getting into that, and it's sort of why I'm actually really kind of excited for the new stuff, just because like, oh, I've already heard some stuff off of it, and that's interesting, but I'm really curious as to how you will continue to either ride that line. And again, I think that's every artist. I think a lot of artists do that, but I think I wouldn't say gimmicky, because gimmicky is always kind of, I always feel weird as a critic, or as a person at least perceives himself to be press and critic in terms of how he discusses music and how he interviews artists and things like that. I always feel weird saying something is gimmicky, because I don't really think, well, because like we're at a point now where it's like whatever fucking works. If like you mentioned, like connecting with the audience, whatever fucking works. If you get people jamming out, you get people sort of rocking out to your music. Who fucking cares if you're like a bearded guy wearing a freaking sailor, you know, a Sailor Scout uniform and fucking making the most metal music ever? If you're a bunch of like, you know, weird idol girls singing, can you hear me? Okay, sorry, it must have just dropped out. It must have dropped out. Welcome to the world of internet. Okay. I don't care if that is how you connect with the audience. Fucking rock and roll. If that's what the audience is rocking to, rock and roll. I don't care. I'm happy that you do you, and it's why I never want to ever say, oh, this is a gimmick. Oh, it's this or whatever, because it doesn't. If I think about the history of music and the history of performance music, and just like, you know, like Gigi Allen or your freaking Guar, or even, you know, your older kind of stuff,
or Marilyn Manson, you
know, like God, I've gone through so many of these eras where it's like there are like the artists that kind of didn't try to connect with the audience in some capacity, we have forgotten in time. And there are plenty of those artists in music that are just forgotten, that are just gone, that have vanished into the ether, that had that one hit and that was it. And that's sad, and that happens. It's music in general. But I think if you, no matter what it is you're doing as a musician, and I say musician very much that because it doesn't matter whether it's electronica, whether it's chiptunes, whether it's all these sort of things, because even people say chiptunes is a gimmick, and, you know, I always take that to offense because I love this genre so much. Whatever that happens to be, if you've connected with the audience in some capacity, or connected with at least one person in that crowd and said, I understand that, or that's me, and that kind of thing, I think that's the best you can hope for as an artist. I think that's a beautiful goal to have. in terms of music.
Yeah, and my goal ultimately is to just make people feel the same emotions that the music that I loved make me feel. Music has been such a magical and life-changing power in my life, and when I listen to music, I'm like, wow, I feel so many strong emotions. I just want to give that to other people, you know? And if I'm doing that, who cares if I'm making them laugh or making them cry or making them be like, oh yeah, this is my life, you know? Like, any of those three could be making an impact, and I'll take any of those three, you know?
If you're getting a positive emotional response, I think that's the ultimate goal of any creative is to resonate with the audience and try to get that emotional response, whatever it is, whether it's laughing, crying, being angry at something, or that sort of thing. I think that's the only mission that you really can hope for as a creative that wants to do this as a career. Lex, it was an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. Tell people where they can find you online. Like, especially if they're new to this and they're like, wow, I'm really digging all the stuff she's talking about. Where the hell can I find her music, though?
I have a website. It's thelexiconartist.com, TheLexiconArtist.com. I have a Bandcamp that's also The Lexicon Artist. I have a YouTube that's The Lexicon Artist. I have Facebook that's The Lexicon Artist. So everything is under the same name, except for Twitter and Instagram, where it's LEXTHE Con Artist, Lex the Con Artist. Follow me everywhere. I'm on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Bandcamp. You can find my videos on YouTube and my music on those 3 channels. And I'm active all the time. I'm active on Facebook a lot. Raging Ego's coming out June 6th. Really excited about it. I have a Mother's Day track coming out with Shavzilla. I'm super excited about that as well. So look out for that. May 13th. Really excited about it. And I'm working on a whole bunch of other collaborations that I'm going to put out in the coming summer. So, you know, follow those pages and look out for it because shit's going to be fire. Okay. Like, not even kidding.
That is awesome. Of course, you can find me. I'm at Vincent404. The Twitters, the Facebooks, everybody else. If you want to catch previous episodes of the podcast, you can go to our website, CosmicRadio.TV/8BitLife. There are links to show notes, like I mentioned, previous episodes. And of course, if you happen to have any spare change in your pockets after you bought all of Lex's music and you look in your pocket and you say, hey, look, I got like 5 cents left over, head over to patreon.com/8BitLife and help the show become bigger, better, and more awesomer. So that is it for today. So next time, I'll talk to another geek about something completely and utterly random. Bye, people.
Bye.